Information fueled,
opinion driven. This is Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis.
And so, my fellow Americans,
we talk news.
8:06, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Good morning to your friends. It is Thursday, October 24th. Hope you're doing well. And man, there is so much going on. I want to welcome on in to the Newsmaker Hotline our guest, Rebekah Koffler, a former DIA intelligence officer, Defense Intelligence Agency, the author of a best-selling book, Vladimir Putin's Playbook, and the host of Censored But Not Silenced podcast. Rebekah, you are very well respected in the circles of foreign policy, and I appreciate you being here on Nashville's Morning News. So, a couple of things, real quick. We're talking about the 3,000 North Korean troops that have joined Vladimir Putin. The latest now shows that that's now increased to 12,000 or will increase to 12,000 in, I guess, the next couple of weeks or whatever it is. Were you surprised that North Korea joined Vladimir Putin and Russia? It seems to me some people are saying that these guys are just being sold to Vladimir Putin.
Good morning, Dan, and everybody. Pleasure to be here. No, I was not surprised at all. You see, Putin has assembled an anti-U.S., anti-Western axis of forces that include not only Russia, but also China, Iran, and North Korea, because he has concluded that Russia's break with the United States and the West is permanent, and he wants to make sure that he wins this war in Ukraine, and not only that, that if the United States decides to directly intervene in the kinetic conflict, that there's an entire anti-Western coalition that will come to Russia's rescue.
So when you say that China and Iran are also involved in this, I mean, they don't have troops, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I am. Iran and China doesn't have troops right there embedded with Russia, but that's more as far as arms go and support, maybe communications and drones?
Right. So troops is not the only thing that is required to win wars. There's a thing called combat potential that includes weapon systems, troops, defense economics, and military-industrial complex. So when it comes to weapon systems, Iran has provided drones to Russia, yep. And North Korea also has provided 155 millimeter shells that are required, and China has provided different components that go into Russia's weapon systems, and China rather, has also helped Russia, as well as North Korea and Iran, by the way, to evade sanctions. Remember, Putin sanction-proofed his economy 7 years prior to the invasion of Ukraine, and therefore sanctions are practically ineffective. And because China, Iran, and North Korea for years have been using clandestine networks to push various military components, Russia now is using those clandestine networks, and that's just how things work. Putin has thought pretty much a lot of things through before the invasion, not after, like the Pentagon is doing.
Ukraine has come out and said that, all right, well, you know what, if North Korean troops are going to join the Russians, then they're fair game. One of the questions I would have is, okay, so then what would or should be the United States and our reaction to this, if anything, other than just ramping up what we're already doing?
Well, it depends on what it is that we want to achieve. And to this day, it is not clear to anyone really what the Pentagon's and the Biden administration intention is for this war.
It's a blank check, Rebekah. My opinion is that this is a policy of blank check. Every time you turn around, you know, Ukraine is getting another $450 million. And so to me, I've been very frustrated at exactly what you're saying, which is, what is the end game? There just seems to be a lack of policy.
Absolutely. And let me just remind what Karl von Clausewitz, the preeminent Prussian military strategist, said about getting into the war. No one starts a war, or rather, no one in his senses ought to do so without first being clear in his mind what he intends to achieve by that war and how he intends to conduct it. Well, the Pentagon doesn't have an aim. Like you said, it's a blank check, and the American people have already, as nice as we are, we're frustrated that there's never enough money to help the American people who are suffering with the Biden and Harris administration inflicted economic downturn and the pain that is inflicted on the hurricanes. But there's always enough money to give to someone else. And for what purpose? So Ukraine right now is being destroyed by Putin, and we, unfortunately and regretfully, enabling that destruction. 50% of Ukraine's critical infrastructure is destroyed, according to the United Nations. And Putin has positioned Russia on a wartime footing to fight indefinitely, because for him this is existential. It's his version of the Monroe Doctrine. And so no amount of money is going to pave the way for Ukraine's victory. It's mathematically impossible. And so we are in this never-ending war right now because nobody can climb down the tree. We've climbed up so high because right now the Pentagon cannot really step back because then they would have a huge egg on their faces. Victory to Putin is not something that we want to do. And yet, Ukraine right now is being effectively used as a human shield by the Europeans, who did not want to pay for their own security. That's why Putin invaded. And so, yes, it's going to be more and more and more destruction.
Rebekah, I've got to ask, I think we all know that weakness emboldens strong men like Vladimir Putin. And I think that when you look back on this, journey that we've all been on dealing with Russia and Ukraine for the last many years, I think we can all agree, maybe you disagree, I don't know, I've never spoken to you before, but when the failed pullout of Afghanistan happened, Vladimir Putin better than most. I think that was a signal, though, that he was dealing with a weak administration. The sanctions were weak as well, and that really was a green light for Putin to go into Ukraine. I guess my question is, if Kamala Harris wins the election, do you think that this kind of behavior from Vladimir Putin will continue?
Oh, absolutely. There's nothing that Putin wants more right now than for Kamala Harris to win the election. The Russian intelligence services, just like our U.S. intelligence services, we do profiling, psychological and character and physical profiling of foreign leaders. So the Russian intelligence services have profiled Kamala Harris as vapid, incompetent, and unintelligent. And they also have concluded that Kamala Harris will take the United States on a path to socialism, which destroyed the USSR. And so that is good for Russia. And therefore, Putin is already preparing what it is that he's going to do. But if you allow me, you mentioned Afghanistan and whether that is what gave the green light to Putin. I would like to clarify why Putin did not invade during the presidency of Donald Trump. It is not just the perception of weakness, but it is the true understanding of Putin's mindset and his strategy that President Trump possessed, and Putin knew that. President Trump took action that basically struck at the heart of Putin's anti-U.S. strategy, because the war is really not between Russia and Ukraine. It's a proxy war between Moscow and Washington. And so President Trump understood Russia's strategy, and he's done the following thing. He stood up U.S. Space Force, right? Why is that? It's because Russia, by the way, stood up their Space Forces in 2001. 18 years before we did ours. Why? It's because they know that the U.S. conducts warfare through satellites. Everything from command and control, navigation, missile warning, communication with forces is with the satellites. Well, the Russians plan to target our satellites during the time of war with destructive action, and also in the run-up to the war, and even in peacetime with non-destructive actions such as GPS jamming. And that's what the space is for. Well, Trump understood that, and he said, we're going to do to the Russians the same thing that they want to do to us. Mm-hmm. The second thing that he did was he authorized offensive cyber operations against the Russians to counter Russia's space warfare doctrine. The third thing, there are really 5 things. I have a piece written about it in the Federalist. Anybody can go read it. Why the only U.S. president that Putin feared was Trump. So I'm only going to mention 3 here for the sake of time. So the third one is President Trump authorized the development of a low-yield tactical nuclear warhead for our Navy to be deployed on a cruise missile, sea-launched. And that was countering Putin's escalate to de-escalate doctrine. Putin knew how well Trump understands, and that's why he didn't do it. Well, Biden came to power, and first of all, he canceled that tactical nuclear warhead on a cruise missile. Yep. And then what he did, he basically removed U.S. advantage in energy production by canceling the Keystone Pipeline, which enabled Putin's defense budget to rise 50%, and that's how the war machine was financed. So there are a lot of moving parts here, and Putin understands that Trump understands him better, and Kamala doesn't.
Well, I mean, you just defined peace through strength. I mean, for Donald Trump, he was strong, and therefore, and he did the various things that you just mentioned that he did. Some I didn't know about, so I'm going to go and read that piece. But for Donald Trump, he exhibited strength through his words, his actions, his policy, and that did keep Vladimir Putin at bay. Now, here's the big question. Donald Trump says that he can wrap this thing up in a day, even before he's elected. I'm not going to lead the witness. I've got my own ideas, but what do you think about that?
What do I think about that? I think it is viable, and I think it is the only sensible solution to do right now to prevent the destruction of Ukraine. So, unlike Kamala Harris, the Russian intelligence services have profiled President Trump as unpredictable. Yes. And that is the hardest thing for them to wrap their brain about. And so Trump is a very skilled negotiator. He's a business person, remember? And so when Trump starts negotiating with Putin, Putin is not going to know whether Trump is bluffing or not. Trump demonstrated that he's not afraid to spill the blood of the Russian forces. In Syria, Trump had authorized the destruction, or a missile strike rather, that killed about 300 Russian mercenaries, the Wagner Group. And Putin did not blink. He just ate it. There was no retaliation. And so when negotiation proceeds, the Russians are going to have a very hard time assessing President Trump. And he will likely get a better deal for Ukraine, President Trump will, than anyone else would. No, I can't promise that Putin is going to give back the 20% of Ukraine's territory that Russian military controls now. But hands down, President Trump is the only person who's going to get a better deal.
Is part of that forcing Ukraine and Zelensky to the table? Because right now Zelensky is like arms folded, stamping his feet, saying he's not going to go to the negotiating table with Vladimir Putin. Is it just as simple? And we've only got about 90 seconds left. Is it as simple as that? Telling Zelensky that the faucet of money is going to stop unless he goes to the negotiating table?
Yes, it is. Zelensky is behaving the way that he's behaving, setting unachievable war goals is because he's been allowed to. Remember, every single time he came to Washington, he walked away with billions and billions of dollars. And we're right now depleting our own weapons arsenal, flowing this weaponry to Ukraine, right? Which is absolutely idiotic things to do. And someone needs to put their foot down so that Zelensky accepts reality.
Rebekah, I hope you'll come back because you are amazing, and I very much appreciate you joining us here at Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7. Rebekah Koffler is our guest, and I got to tell you, there's so much there to talk about, and we'll continue that conversation another time. Her book, by the way, is she's a former DIA intelligence officer, the author of a best-selling book, Putin's Playbook, the host of Censored But Not Silenced podcast. And again, Rebekah, will have you on again soon if you'll come on, and very much appreciate the call.